He was the only man brave enough to tell Tupac Shakur that his ideas were bad. Most people treated the rap legend like royalty. They bowed their heads and said yes to everything. But this man treated the icon like an equal. They were both stubborn. They were both wild. They were fire and gasoline mixed together in a small cell. The first time they met, the air smelled like stale floor wax and misery. It was inside the Clinton Correctional Facility. The steel doors slammed shut with a heavy thud. Bruce Washington did not rap for the fame. He rapped to survive. He grew up on the hard streets of New Jersey. He dodged bullets and sold poison just to put food on the table. But here is the thing. He was best friends with Tupac's godbrother, Yaki Kadafi, but he did not know the truth. He thought the family connection was a joke. Then he saw the pictures taped to the concrete wall. When the legend wanted to name his group the Little Homies, Bruce refused. He pointed to a dark tattoo on his skin. That one moment changed music history forever. Who was the street soldier who became the general, and why does his story carry the heavy weight of a fallen star? Bruce Washington entered the world on April 3rd, 1973. The location was Montclair, New Jersey. This was not a place for the weak. His house was full of life. It was a loud home. He had brothers and sisters running through the halls. Feet stomped on the floorboards. Laughter bounced off the walls. The house was full of noise, and it was full of love. But outside the front door, the world was cold. The 1980s were hard on New Jersey. The factories that once gave men honest work were closing down. Rust covered the machines. Weeds grew through the cracks in the parking lots. Families watched their savings disappear. Bruce was just a boy. But he saw the struggle. He saw the worry in the eyes of the adults. He felt the tension in the air. But then, he heard something else. A new sound started to take over the block. It shook the pavement. It rattled the windows of passing cars. It was the heavy bass of hip-hop. Bruce fell in love with the rhythm. He listened to the smooth rhymes of Cool G rap. He studied the style of the Juice Crew. He listened to KRS-One preaching knowledge over hard beats. The music lit a fire inside his chest. It gave him a voice. He stood in front of the mirror. He practiced his flow. He wanted to hold the microphone and tell his story. He wanted the world to know his name. He wanted to be a star. But here's the deal. Dreams cost money. And in his neighborhood, money was a ghost. It was hard to find and easy to lose. Bruce was a teenager with big ambition, but the city had nothing for him. He looked for a job. He looked for a way out, but the doors were locked. The shops were not hiring young men from his side of town. Poverty pulled at him like gravity. It is hard to focus on writing rhymes when your stomach is growling. It is hard to dream about the future when you cannot pay for today. So, Bruce made a choice. It was the same choice many young men made in his neighborhood. He turned to the streets. If the world would not give him a job, he would create his own hustle. He stepped onto the corner. He learned the rules of the concrete jungle. He dodged bullets. He sold drugs. He did what he had to do to put food on the table. He became a soldier in a war for survival. But he did not walk these dangerous streets alone. He had a partner. His name was Yaki Kadafi. Kadafi was younger than Bruce. He was smaller, but he had the heart of a lion. Bruce looked at Kadafi and saw a little brother. He took the younger boy under his wing. He decided to protect him. They watched each other's backs. They shared their money. They shared their dreams. One day, Kadafi told Bruce a secret. He said his godbrother was a famous rapper. He said his godbrother was Tupac Shakur. Bruce laughed. He thought it was a joke. Everyone claimed to know a celebrity. It was just talk. He told Kadafi to stop lying. Then, he went to Kadafi's house. He saw the pictures on the wall. There stood Kadafi, smiling next to the rap legend. The truth hit Bruce like a punch. The connection was real. But wait, it gets worse. Tupac was not on a stage. He was not in a studio. He was in a cage. The superstar sat inside the Clinton Correctional Facility. The law had locked him away. Kadafi told Bruce they were going to visit him. The drive to the prison was long. The walls of the facility were high and gray. Razor wire sparkled in the sun. The air inside smelled like stale floor wax and misery. The steel doors slammed shut with a heavy thud. Then, Bruce saw him. Tupac Shakur walked into the room. He did not look like a broken man. He looked like a king in exile. His energy filled the small space. Tupac looked at Bruce. Bruce looked at Tupac. Most people trembled when they met the legend. They bowed their heads. They said yes to everything he said. They treated him like royalty. Bruce was different. Bruce was a soldier from Jersey. He did not bow to any man. Tupac started talking about his plans. He had a notebook full of ideas. He wanted to start a new rap group. He looked at Bruce and Kadafi. His eyes shined with excitement. "We will call the group the Little Homies," Tupac said. The room went quiet. Little Homie sounded cute. It sounded safe. Bruce shook his head. He looked the legend in the eye. "No," Bruce said. The air in the room grew thick. Nobody told Tupac no. Bruce explained himself. He said they were not children. They were not little. They were grown men surviving in a war zone. They were fighting for their lives every single day. The name had to be hard. It had to be real. Bruce rolled up his sleeve. He pointed to a dark tattoo on his skin. He showed Tupac the ink. The image spoke louder than words. It represented rebellion. It represented a life lived outside the rules of normal society. Tupac stared at the tattoo. He stared at Bruce. A smile spread across the star's face. He realized something important. Bruce was not just another fan. He was not a follower. He was an equal. He was fire, just like Tupac. That moment changed everything. The name Little Homies died in that visiting room. A new vision was born. They would not be children. They would be outlaws. Bruce Washington had earned his place. He was no longer just a street soldier. He was now the right-hand man to the most dangerous rapper in the world. He had the talent. He had the bravery. He had the loyalty. But gravity pulls hardest on those who fly the highest. Bruce had found his ticket out of the hood, but he did not know the price he would have to pay. The road ahead was paved with gold, but it led straight off a cliff. The year was 1996. The location was Los Angeles, California. The sun shined brighter here than it did in New Jersey. The palm trees swayed in the warm breeze. But inside Can-Am Studios, a storm was brewing. Bruce Washington was gone. That name belonged to a poor kid from the bricks. The man standing next to Tupac Shakur now had a new name. He was Hussein Fatal. Tupac gave him this name. He named his group the Outlaws. He gave each member the name of a tyrant or an enemy of the state. It was a statement. It told the world they were at war with the system. Hussein Fatal took his new role seriously. He was the general. The studio air was thick with smoke and adrenaline. The music did not stop. Tupac worked like he was running out of time. He wrote verses in 10 minutes. He ran into the booth. He laid down his vocals in one take. Most rappers needed days to finish a song. Tupac finished 3 songs before lunch. Picture this. The beat dropped for a track called Hit 'Em Up. The bass shook the coffee and the cups on the table. The anger in the room was real. This was not just music. This was a battle cry. Tupac looked at Fatal. He nodded. It was time to go to work. Fatal stepped up to the microphone. He did not have a paper in his hand. He had the rhymes in his head. He had the hunger in his belly. He attacked the beat. His voice was deep. His flow was aggressive. He matched Tupac's energy perfectly. They were two sides of the same coin. They were both loud. They were both fearless. Hit 'Em Up became the most famous diss track in history. It played out of every car window from New York to Oakland. It blasted from boomboxes on every street corner. You could not escape it. Suddenly, the boy who used to sell drugs to eat was a superstar. The money started to pour in. It did not trickle. It flooded. The group released the album, All Eyes on Me. It was a double disc. This had never happened in rap history before. Critics said it was too long. They said it would cost too much. They were wrong. The album sold 566,000 copies in the first week alone. Within a few months, it sold 5 million copies. It went diamond. It generated millions of dollars. The life of Hussein Fatal changed overnight. He traded the cold streets of Montclair for the bright lights of Hollywood. He traded stolen cars for brand new Mercedes-Benz convertibles. The leather seats smelled like success. The chrome rims flashed in the sun. He wore Versace silk shirts. He wore gold chains that weighed heavy on his neck. He ate steak and lobster whenever he wanted. He stayed in 5-star hotels where the sheets felt like water. But here is the deal. It was not just about the money. It was about the respect. Hussein Fatal and the Outlaws became heroes in the black community. They represented something powerful. They showed that you could come from nothing and become everything. They were unapologetic. They did not change their voices to please the mainstream. They forced the mainstream to listen to them. Young men in the inner city started to dress like them. They wore bandanas tied around their heads. They wore army fatigues. They walked with their heads held high. Fatal walked into clubs, and the Red Sea parted. Women screamed his name. Men reached out to shake his hand. He was living the dream. He was 23 years old, and he had the world in his palm. Tupac treated him like a brother. They were inseparable. They drove fast cars down the Pacific Coast Highway. They laughed at the people who doubted them. They felt untouchable. Gravity did not seem to apply to them. They were flying too high. But success has a shadow, and the brighter the light, the darker the shadow grows. The rivalry between the East Coast and the West Coast was getting dangerous. The words in their songs were making people angry. Real street gangs were getting involved. The line between entertainment and reality blurred. Fatal looked around at the parties. He saw the champagne flowing. He saw the smiles. But he also saw the jealousy. He felt the tension. He carried a gun not for show, but for safety. He knew the streets. He knew that when you are on top, everyone wants to knock you down. Tupac felt it too. The rap legend spoke about death constantly. He recorded music as if he knew his clock was ticking. Fatal tried to be the protector. He was the muscle. He was the one who would jump in front of a bullet. He watched the door while Tupac slept. He watched the crowd while Tupac performed. They were winning. They were the kings of the music industry. They had the #1 album in the country. They had the money. They had the fame. But wait, it gets worse. The calendar turned to September. The summer heat was fading, but the fire around them was burning hotter than ever. They made plans to go to Las Vegas. It was supposed to be a celebration. It was fight night. Mike Tyson was boxing. The whole world would be there. Fatal packed his bags. He was ready to ride with his general. He was ready to celebrate another victory. But then, a simple twist of fate happened. A decision was made that seemed small at the time. While the world saw a smile, the shadows were growing. The party was about to end, and the music was about to stop. The silence was louder than the applause. The calendar on the wall said September 7th, 1996. The Outlaws packed their bags. They were heading to Las Vegas. The city of sin was calling their names. The lights were bright. The gambling tables were open. Mike Tyson was going to fight in the ring. It was going to be the party of the century. Tupac Shakur led the way. He was excited. He felt invincible. But Bruce Washington, the man known as Hussein Fatal, stood still. He did not pack a bag. He did not get on the plane. He had made a mistake. A past fight had caught up with him. He had an assault charge hanging over his head. The court told him he could not leave New Jersey. If he left the state, he would go to jail. So the general stayed behind. He watched his brothers leave. He felt a knot in his stomach. He was the protector. He was the muscle. But the law forced him to sit on the bench. He told himself it would be fine. It was just one weekend. They would be back on Monday. They would laugh about the trip. But here is the crushing truth. They never came back. That night in Las Vegas, a white Cadillac pulled up beside Tupac's car. A hand reached out. A gun flashed. 4 bullets shattered the peace. Back in New Jersey, the phone rang. Bruce picked it up. The voice on the other end was shaking. Tupac was shot. Bruce dropped the phone. The room spun. He felt sick. He knew the formation. He knew where the Outlaws sat in the car. If he had been there, he would have been in the back seat. He would have been on the side where the bullets hit. He told everyone who would listen. He said he could have stopped it. He said he would have seen the shooter. He said he would have fired back. Guilt is a heavy stone. Bruce carried that stone every single day. Tupac fought for his life for 6 days. But on September 13th, the king died. The general had lost his commander. The world cried. But Bruce did not just cry. He raged. He punched walls. He screamed at the sky. The dream was over. The money, the fame, the future, it all vanished in a cloud of gunpowder. But wait, it gets worse. The tragedy did not stop with Tupac. Bruce turned to his best friend for support. Yaki Kadafi was the only one who understood the pain. Kadafi was there that night in Vegas. He saw the shooting. He was a witness. They promised to keep the group alive. They promised to carry the torch. But gravity pulled them down again. 2 months later, in November 1996, the phone rang again. Yaki Kadafi was dead. He was found in an apartment hallway in New Jersey. He had been shot in the head. He was only 19 years old. Bruce fell to his knees. In 60 days, he lost his mentor and his little brother. The two people he loved most were gone. The silence in his house was deafening. The music stopped. The gold chains felt like chains of iron. The fast cars looked like coffins on wheels. Bruce tried to stay with the outlaws, but without Tupac, the group was a ship without a captain. They fought over money. They fought over contracts. They fought over direction. Bruce looked at the contract Tupac's record label offered them. He did not like what he saw. He felt it was unfair. He felt they were being used. So, the general went AWOL. He left the group. He walked away from the only team he ever knew. He tried to start a solo career. He released albums. He worked with Ja Rule and the Murder Inc. label. He had talent. His voice was still strong. His rhymes were still sharp. But the magic was gone. The industry is cold. When you are on top, they love you. When you fall, they do not answer your calls. Bruce went back to the grind. He toured small clubs. He slept in cheap hotels. He missed the private jets. He missed the lobster dinners. He missed the feeling of being untouchable. Years passed. The world moved on. New rappers took the spotlight. Bruce became a memory to most people. He was a footnote in history books, but he was a survivor. He had survived the streets of Montclair. He had survived the death of his friends. He had survived the collapse of his career. He settled down. He had a family. He found a new rhythm. He was 42 years old in the year 2015. He had plans to write a book. He wanted to tell his side of the story. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. It was July 10th. The summer air was hot and sticky in Georgia. Bruce was driving a black Dodge Challenger. It was a muscle car. It was powerful. It was fast. He was on the highway. The engine roared. The road stretched out in front of him. Maybe he was thinking about the past. Maybe he was thinking about the future. Maybe he just liked the speed. He lost control. The car swerved. It left the road. It snapped 2 trees in half. The metal twisted and screamed. The car flipped and rolled. When the dust settled, there was only silence. The man who dodged bullets in New Jersey could not dodge this. The man who missed the flight to Vegas could not miss this tree. Hussein Fatal took his last breath on the side of a dark road. He died 19 years after Tupac. He died 19 years after Gaddafi. The general had finally gone to join his army. The war was over. And the soldier was finally at rest. The news of Tupac Shakur's death hit the world like an earthquake. People in New York City cried in the streets. People in Los Angeles lit candles on the sidewalks. Radio stations played his songs for 24 hours a day. The media could not get enough of the tragedy. They put his face on every magazine cover. They sold millions of newspapers. Everyone talked about the fallen king. They called him a martyr. They called him a poet. They called him a prophet. But here's the sad truth. While the world mourned the star, they forgot about the soldiers. The media did not care about the men left behind in the wreckage. Bruce Washington, the man they called Hussein Fatal, watched the circus from the sidelines. He saw the hypocrisy clearly. Record executives wore black suits to the funeral. They shook hands. They wiped away fake tears. They told the outlaws that everything would be okay. They promised to take care of Tupac's brothers. They said the mission would continue. But promises in the music industry are written in sand. Once the cameras turned off, the phone calls stopped coming. The executives looked at the bottom line. Without Tupac, they did not see a profit. They saw a liability. They offered the outlaws a new contract. Bruce read the papers. His hands shook with anger. It was a slave deal. They wanted to own his voice. They wanted to own his publishing. They wanted to take everything Tupac had built and sell it for pennies. Bruce refused. He had too much pride. He had learned from the best. He knew his worth. So, the general walked away. He left the group he helped name. He left the brothers he swore to protect. He stepped out into the cold world alone. Picture this. 1 year, he was riding in limousines and drinking expensive champagne. The next year, he was back to the grind. He released solo albums, but the machine was not behind him. He did features with Ja Rule and Murder Inc., but he was always the guest, never the star. He performed in small clubs where the floors were sticky with spilled beer, the sound systems were bad, the crowds were small. He looked out at the faces in the audience. They wanted him to rap the old songs. They wanted to hear stories about Tupac. They did not care about Bruce Washington. They only cared about the ghost standing next to him. It is a heavy burden to carry. He was a talented artist. He had a powerful voice, but he was trapped in a shadow that stretched for miles. For 19 years, he fought to carve out his own lane. He survived the death of his mentor. He survived the murder of his best friend, Yaki Kadafi. He survived the collapse of his music career. He raised a family. He found a way to keep smiling. But gravity always wins in the end. On July 10th, 2015, the news broke again. But this time, it was not an earthquake. It was a whisper. Hussein Fatal was dead. He died in a car crash in Georgia. A black Dodge Challenger lost control on the highway. It snapped 2 trees in half. The metal twisted and screamed. And just like that, the general was gone. The reaction from the public was quiet. There were no candlelight vigils in the streets. There were no magazine covers. The news cycle gave him 30 seconds of airtime, and then they moved on to the weather report. This is the cold reality of fame. It loves you when you are on top. It leaves you when you fall. But for the people who knew the truth, his death meant something more. It marked the end of an era. Bruce Washington was the last link to a golden age. He was the one who looked Tupac in the eye and told him no. He was the fire that matched the gasoline. He spent his whole life dodging bullets in New Jersey. He survived the war between the East Coast and the West Coast. He survived the dangerous streets that claimed so many of his friends. In the end, it was not a bullet that took him. It was a simple accident on a summer road. He died at 42 years old. Some people say it was a tragedy, but others look at it differently. They say the soldier finally went home. After 19 years of fighting alone, the general finally reunited with his king. The silence was over, and somewhere beyond the pain and the struggle, the music started playing again. History often forgets the man holding the shield. We remember the king. We remember the shining crown, but we forget the general who held the line. Bruce Washington lived with a ghost for 19 years. He carried the heavy weight of a terrible question. What if? What if he got on that plane to Las Vegas? What if he sat in the back seat of that white BMW? Maybe his eyes would have seen the shooter. Maybe his gun would have fired back. Maybe the music would have never stopped. That question is a torture chamber. It can drive a man crazy. But Bruce did not break. He kept moving forward. He refused to let the tragedy define his whole life. Here is the deal. The Outlaws changed the sound of hip-hop forever. Before them, rap groups were just friends making music. After them, rap groups became armies. They brought a militant style to the culture. They wore fatigues. They moved like soldiers. They made us feel the anger and the passion. You hear Bruce's voice on Hit 'Em Up and you feel the fire. It is raw. It is aggressive. It grabs you by the collar and demands your attention. That energy does not fade away. It lives on in every young artist who speaks truth to power. Bruce Washington was the backbone. He was the one brave enough to challenge Tupac Shakur. He was the only one who could match the legend's intensity. He did not die a billionaire. He did not die on the front page of the New York Times. The industry that used his talent turned its back on him. But money is not the only way to measure a man. He was a father. He was a loyal friend. He was a survivor who made it out of the bricks of New Jersey. He navigated the most dangerous waters in music history and kept his soul intact. Picture the reunion. The general finally walks into the room. The king smiles. The little brother laughs. The war is finally over. The soldiers can put down their guns. The noise of the world fades away. Bruce Washington deserves his flowers. He gave his life to the culture. He gave his loyalty to his brothers. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. What is your favorite memory of the Outlaws? Do you think history has treated Hussein Fatal fairly? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.